One of the organizations that has spent a long time helping people in disaster areas is a little-known organization around here, I think. It's called ShelterBox. And Rotary International has been the sponsor of ShelterBox, in fact, the originators of ShelterBox, going back to about 2000 or the year 2002. One of the ambassadors, one of the people spreading the word about ShelterBox is Tom Grant here in Zelienople. Tom, how did you get involved with ShelterBox?
Well, I was recovering from a major surgery, and I was just sitting in my chair in the family room there, and I don't know why, but all of a sudden these two words came to my head, which were disaster box. And one of the members of Rotary told me later that she did an article in our newsletter about ShelterBox. So that must have been the key right there, but at that time it just came out of thin air. So I went online, Googled it, and read about it, and decided
and found out there was an organization.
Found out there was an organization called ShelterBox, which dealt with disasters.
Tell us what ShelterBox is and what they do.
Well, ShelterBox is a disaster relief organization, as you mentioned, and we operate around the world internationally. We've been to 90-some countries. The whole premise of our organization is, it started with the question, what do people need if they lost everything in a disaster? And our founder in Cornwall, England, began pondering that question, and he came up with the idea of a box, putting the essential things in there that people would need.
So essentially you're sending a big box of something to people in disaster
Right.
areas?
It started out as a small box, and they just kept adding to it. In fact, at one point he went into the local hardware store to get some ideas. So, and that evolved eventually into the green box that we have today.
Tom, all disasters aren't alike, and obviously the needs of people in some of those disasters would vary depending upon conditions. How do you decide what to send to each of these areas?
Well, we have people called response team members. Most of the people in our organization are all volunteers, and these men and women go to a country or an area after disaster, and they make a recommendation back to our headquarters in Cornwall, England, and they decide which boxes to send and what to put in them.
Is there such thing as a typical box?
A typical box, the original box was, it would contain our 15 by 15 tent, double wall tent, which in wind tunnel tests would sustain 60-mile-an-hour winds. We have cookware, stainless steel cookware. We have a cook stove, wood-burning cook stove, blankets, ground covers, a little toolkit with a saw and a hammer and things like that in it. And we have mosquito netting where appropriate. And my favorite thing, having been a teacher, is we have a little educational kit for children, which contains colored pencils, a tablet, a compass, and even a little small like chalkboard that they can write on.
Let's visualize the box.
Yes.
How many people would each box serve?
Well, around 10, a family, essentially.
So
yes.
the tent or the shelter would be enough for 10 people?
Yeah, and in a crunch it could be even more. And it comes with two privacy screens on either side of the tent in case someone's sick, or maybe there's a young child, or maybe there are people who just want to get away from the other people for a while, and they can go into those areas. Mm-hmm.
I remember pictures on television of a disaster where there was a flood, and most of the people were homeless.
Yes.
Most of the people had no shelter whatsoever.
Right.
How many boxes would you send to an area?
Well, it would depend. Recently we had the response to a terrible flooding in Paraguay. And we have sent so far around 2,000 boxes, but that's based on the appraisal of the people that we send over there.
So if somebody goes to the area to really experience the situation and what the needs are, and then determines what kind of stuff to put in the box.
Yes. No, well, the box would have the same things in it, but we may decide not to send the whole box. In some cases, particularly where there's a lot of wind, we might send our shelter kit, which contains essential tools, wire, nails, and two rather large tarpaulins to help people in that case. Maybe build a temporary shelter.
There are so many other organizations, the International Red Cross, the American Red Cross, the Salvation Army, and so many other international organizations. Don't some of them provide that same kind of material?
Some of them do. Our unique feature is that we specialize in just providing people with shelter, and we rely on other organizations to provide the medical care, the food that they might need. Yes, some of them do, but we have this, I like to think of as a family tent. Other organizations such as the Red Cross or the UN the UN refugee organization. They might provide tenting and shelter, but they're large tents, which may include multiple families. And I think it's much better if you can just keep the family unit together as one.
I understand you were involved with Katrina, you were involved with
Right.
Hurricane Sandy,
Yes.
both in this country,
Right.
obviously.
Yes, yeah.
Can you tell us something about what was done in those areas?
Well, in the case of Katrina, we sent 1,000 boxes. That was in our sort of our early days of our work. We sent over 1,000 boxes down. Of course, with Katrina, you have the FEMA and the U.S. government and the Red Cross, large organizations that could provide shelter for many, many people. But we sent 1,000 boxes to deal with 1,000 families.
Tom, how do you deal with it? Because the logistics must be very interesting because so many organizations and governmental bodies are working to solve the same problems.
Right.
How do you work so you're not getting in each other's way?
Oh, that's what's impressed me about the ShelterBox and the other organizations. They seem to work very, very well together when you get to a disaster area, and there's not that competition that you might think, I don't believe.
You were saying a few minutes ago that this started in Cornwall, England, with a Rotary Club.
Yeah.
Somebody had the idea that maybe something can be done.
Yeah.
How did it expand beyond that one city?
Well, I think that the idea was just so unique and so clever that you have this box that has all the things in it that people need to really get their lives started over again, set up their household, and have some continuity until they can get back in their permanent structure. And it just seemed like such a great idea that it just spread out among the clubs in England and eventually reached a point where it was spreading out throughout Europe. And in 2012, the Rotary International decided to make it a partner project of Rotary. We're not a part of Rotary, we partner with Rotary. And that gave us access to Rotary Clubs and that kind of support.
To date, Tom, how many different families have you served?
Well, this past year was 28,000 around the world, 28,000 families.
Now, I know that you don't do this to get thanks. You do it because it's the right thing to do, and that's what Rotary stands for,
Right.
service above self.
Yes.
Do you ever get any feedback from the people that you serve?
I get the messages from ShelterBox, the U.S. branch of ShelterBox, where they send us these stories about people. Yeah, it's pretty heartwarming, some of the stories you read about people getting these tents and sort of saving their lives.
There's been some recent problems around the world. Was ShelterBox involved with some
Yeah,
of that?
we still are in Nepal helping out with that terrible earthquake they had. And that was especially difficult because the areas that were affected by the earthquake were scattered all over the place. And of course with the earthquake, then you have the roads not being open, very difficult to get the materials there. It was a mountainous region. And it was a very, very difficult deployment for us. And we're still working with the refugees coming out of Syria. We're operating in 4 or 5 different countries now.
This costs a lot of money, and this is a volunteer organization.
Yeah.
Where does the money come from?
Donations. I go around to clubs, ask for money, and get a pretty good response in this part of the state.
Do people in Zelienople respond pretty well?
Well, our club has provided 10 boxes so far in the last 4 years that I've been doing this. Yeah, we respond very well. And
how much does each box cost?
the cost of a box is $1,000, and that includes everything in the box, the tent and all the other materials, and it includes shipping anywhere in the world.
Is there one warehouse that serves the whole world?
No, we have warehouses around the world. We pre-deploy a lot of this material. Panama is in South America. We have our headquarters in Sarasota, Florida. There's a headquarters deployment center. Hong Kong, Indonesia, Australia, Dubai. We all have materials pre-deployed there. We average 2 deployments a month. For the last 4 years, we've averaged about 2 a month.
And most of them are floods or hurricanes or earthquakes?
About 40, currently in the last year or so, about half have been floods. Overall, about 40% are floods, and we have earthquakes, typhoons, and now increasingly also we're getting conflicts. In Africa particularly, right now we're doing some work with refugees who are fleeing that terrorist group, Boko Haram, which started in Nigeria. People are fleeing Nigeria, moving into other countries, and we started working with them, those refugees.
So this has been around since the year 2000
Yes.
and 2002 when Rotary got officially involved with it. What do you think it's going to be 10 years from now?
Oh, I think it's going to be growing. There's so much support for it. When I go to Rotary Clubs, I go to community activities like festivals and things, I get a tremendous response from people about what a unique idea it is. You know, how it's unusual. It's not your normal, your average disaster relief organization.
Take a lot of your time?
It takes a fair amount of time, yeah. Last year I did 50 presentations. The year before was 65. And,
all in the immediate Zelienople area?
well, I've gone as far as Valley Forge, Pennsylvania.
Oh, really?
Yes,
Oh.
yeah. There was a state convention there of physical education teachers I was invited to. I have a friend, and I went down there. Yeah.
When you make your presentation to tell them about something they'd probably never heard of before,
Right.
what kind of response do you get?
They're very impressed usually. I tell people it's just the best charity they've never heard of. In this area in Western Pennsylvania, which I found out is an extremely generous area, I get a very good response. But I deal with a lot of small clubs. We have a lot of smaller Rotary clubs in Western Pennsylvania, some 10, 15 members. So what they do, I have 3 clubs up near Bradford who went together with $330 each and bought a box. I have another 2 clubs who joined together and bought a box. So I get a very good response. There are a few clubs I can't get to.
And they're on notice right now.
They're on notice. They know who they are, yeah.
Suppose some folks listening in who belong to an organization or individually want to donate to ShelterBox. How can they do that?
Well, the best way to do it is to go on the ShelterBox website, which is simply shelterboxusa.org. And one of our neat features is if an organization or an individual contributes $1,000 to purchase a box, that person or that organization gets a tracking number so that eventually they will know where that box went and which people benefited from it.
Tom, thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Larry. Thank you.
ShelterBox, an organization that I'm hearing about for the first time and many others will in the future, finding out what they're doing to help in disaster areas around the world. I'm Larry Berg. We'll see you next time on Faces and Places.